Ooh, what up, though? This is another episode of Knockouts and Three Counts. But before we get to you with the action, it is WrestleMania week, and we've got quite the guest for you. We've got Greg Gagne coming through the show. We're going to talk about Remco toys. We're going to talk about his career. We're going to talk about the AWA, talk a little bit about Tiffany Stratton and all those things. But shout out to our sponsors at Potter's Tree Service. If you're in the need for any of that stuff, make sure you tell them Knockouts and Three Counts sent you. Enjoy the show. You don't need Hacksaw, Jim Duggan, Ace of Potter, and the guys at Potter's Tree Service will get you together. In the meantime, here we go.
This is the Ring of Honor, a.k.a. Shane T, boy, the baddest champion you ever seen, boy.
This is Mr. Anderson.
This is good old JR Jim Ross, and you are listening.
You're listening to Knockouts and Three Counts.
That might be one of the craziest knockouts I've ever seen in my life.
Knockouts and Three Counts is the podcast, baby. It's the real deal, baby.
Knockouts and Three Counts starts now.
What up, though, ladies and gents? Like I said, we've got quite the episode for you on this WrestleMania week episode. As you're watching this, I'm already made my way to Philly, but tonight we are joined by Greg Gagne. Greg, I appreciate the time, man.
Well, Kyle, thank you for having me on. You're already in Philly, huh?
No, I'll be in Philly. By the time they're watching this, is going to air WrestleMania week. So right now I'm still in Detroit, but by the time they're watching this, I will already be in Philly with our guy Megaran. And if you're at WrestleCon, we'll have a table there too. So make sure you come through. Man, I'm looking forward to getting down there because it gets me away from going postal at the post office. That's what my shoot job is. So we'll get with that to start. But man, I appreciate the time with you coming on. We were talking about it a little bit before we got started, and I appreciate you rescheduling things with your podcast, which is as great a place as any to start. Talk to me about what made you want to get into the podcast game with Magnum TA, and tell everybody what you got going on.
Well, the reason we got on is because we don't have a TV show to promote our line. We're doing the action figures, and Steve Rosenthal, who did our back in the 80s for the AWA, interesting story with him. His son was a wrestling fan, and they lived in New York, and of course, WWE or WWF at that time. So Steve at the Remco line, he went up to, he had developed the Karate Kid and a few others that were just huge sellers for Remco. And he called up Vince, went up for a meeting with him, and came in and said, Vince, here's what I'd like to do with these action figures. Here's the contract of your wrestlers. And he said, I got to rewrite this thing a little bit. Do this, do that, then come back and see me. Changed the contract, came back, and Vince said, there's a couple other things we need changed on. He said, well, this is the way you wanted it. That's the way we did it. Well, let's change this around over here and this, and then I'll see you. So he went back, gave him everything he wanted. He said, oh, by the way, when you come back, bring it, I want some upfront money. So the third time Steve came back, he had the upfront money, he had the contract redone. And as he walked in, Vince threw a book at him and he said, you know these people? And he said, yeah, they're my competitor. And he said, well, I just signed a deal with them.
Damn.
So he went online and talked to people, what's an organization like the WWF. And they said, well, the largest one is the AWA, and that's with Verne Gagne. So Steve got on a plane and they called Verne, came in and cut a deal with us. And he ran the Remco line for 8 years with the AWA talent. And it was the biggest line that Remco ever had. He retired. And then a few months back, he called me and he said, hey, how would you like to get back into the action figure? And I said, well, with what? We don't have a wrestling program or anything. He said, well, do you have any ideas? I said, well, if I was going to do it, I would go back to the individuals that built professional wrestling when wrestling first started on TV. And that was on the DuPont network out of Chicago in 1950. And take the stars from them and build it up to we can't get everybody because McMahon's got everybody on the contract, and take those people, take the lady wrestlers who never had an action figure, the little people, let's do the referees, the ring announcers, whatever we can do. So he said, well, have at it. Signed 255 pieces of talent. men, women, the little people, announcers, referees, promoters. We got the whole works going on. And we came out with our first line not too long ago. And the Ultra line, we have two different lines, the Ultra line and the Remco. And in fact, I've got one right here. Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it a little bit. There you go. I got you up on the screen.
Okay, and when you open that up, there's a story on the side, and they're really collectors. I've got that. I've got a Magnum TA here, a Luth Fez. Now, the problem is...
Move it over a little bit that way. There you go.
The action figure itself, how's that?
Yep, perfect.
And show you a couple others later. But anyhow, we're sold out. There's one company that still has a few left. If you want to get one, we still have Verne, Luth Fez. There's a few Hansen, a few Brody, Kerry Von Erich, and Magnum TA. And it's with the WrestlingCollection.com.
Dude, the thing I like about the figures from just first glance is, like, obviously you talked about how you guys already had worked together when AWA was still around, but I love the fact that it keeps like that old school look to them. Obviously, like everything else in wrestling, everything evolves over time, and obviously the action figures that you see now from a WWE or whomever else is different from what you would have seen back then. But I like the idea of that they have that old school vibe to them again. It kind of brings back some of that nostalgia, and I feel like that kind of goes right along with what you were saying as far as to some of the names that are on this line.
Yeah, this is a fantastic line, and we've got, going back in the 50s, you got the Crusher and the Bruiser, you got Killer Kowalski, Haystack Calhoun, Hunt Schmidt, Hardboiled Haggerty, Don Leo Jonathan. These are the people that it really built. Today's public, they think it's all WWE. I mean, they pretty much put everybody out of business. And these are the pioneers that really built this sport to what it was and what it is today. More wrestling back then than there is now, but different styles, different times.
Well, you mentioned one of the names that I wanted to talk about. You have your podcast with Magnum TA. Talk to me a little bit about that. What made you want to get into the podcast game? Obviously, Magnum's got plenty of stories. I know you have plenty of stories that I'm looking forward to getting into as we get through this interview. But what made you decide that the podcast game was something you wanted to enter, and what can people expect from you and Magnum on a podcast?
Well, they'll get the truth, for one thing. Magnum and I are honest and upfront about everything in professional wrestling. So if you want, and it's called Straight Talk with the Boss, Magnum TA and Greg Gagne, and we do it, and it's on the YouTube, and we're going on a couple other areas here pretty quick. But I had called TA and wanted to get him on board for the action figures, and never really been around. We only met like twice the whole time we wrestled, and we had good relationship, but we didn't stay in contact or anything like that. And when I called him, the more I talked to him, I thought, God, this is a guy I would really like to be a partner with us. And I told Steve, I said, we got to bring TA in. He's a good businessman. He's got a great head on his shoulders. He has the passion for wrestling that I have, and our belief in what we believe the people will buy. And we can build these people up to get interest and to buy them. We don't have our TV show. So that's why we said, we better do a podcast so we can get the word out on these action figures so that people know they're there. And there's no reason why any wrestling fan wouldn't want this collection. Our Ultra line, and then our Remco line, which just came out. We've got Bobo Brazil, the Missing Link, the Rock and Roll Express, Nick Boswell. Yeah. Duggan, Tito Santana. Who did I miss? Abdullah the Butcher, is he in that one? We got quite, we can do more in the Remco line than we can on the Ultra line. The Ultra, we can only do six figures a year or every 3 months. And each mold costs us $27,000. So when you get an action figure, an Ultra of Verne or Luth Fez or Brody and Hansen or Kerry Von Erich and Magnum TA, according to everything that's out on the market right now, everybody is saying that is the best product they've ever seen, the most realistic, action figure of an individual that's been on the market.
So talking about Magnum, man, again, like I said, I've watched way too much wrestling in my time, and a lot of it being before I was born. But with that being said, the number one thing that I've always heard, and I've went back and watched a lot of his stuff as well. The one thing you always hear when you hear people bring up the name Magnum TA is that he was a for sure world champion, had the accident not happen and all that stuff. For those who are maybe newer to the game and don't know as much about Magnum TA, what was it that made him such a big star back in his heyday in the NWA?
Well, it was, his look. He's 6'2", and he's 240 pounds, and good looking son of a gun. If you remember the TV show Magnum TA, that's kind of how he got his name, or not Magnum TA, what was the Magnum
PI?
Yeah, and it was Andre the Giant that told him one night. He said, "God, you look just like, Burt Reynolds. You got to go as Magnum TA." And he kind of gave him the name, and that kind of stuck to him. But he had an interesting career. We should have both of us on here today. He had about only a 6-year short term. He was an amateur wrestler, did really well, turned pro, didn't really have much training. And they sent him out to Portland, Oregon with Don Owens. And from there, he went, I think, to Bill Watts. And that's really, when he got to Watts, is really when he started catching on. And then down to Florida, and eventually up to the Charlotte area. And once he got there, he stuck there. And it was just a tragic deal. He was coming home from a match. It was raining. He was in his Porsche. He was just going around a corner, and he hydroplated and flew into a tree. He tells me the story, and God Almighty, it's tough to tell. He was trapped in that car. It took him 8 hours to cut him out, and he had a broken neck. But just think of the toughness of that guy sitting there for 8 hours. He couldn't move his head, and he's locked in there while they're cutting around trying to get him out. And then he was about, I think, 4 months in the hospital, 4 to 6 months in the hospital, and ended his career, which he had a great opportunity to be the NWA champion. He had all the credentials.
That's always, like I said, that's always been the story you heard. And like I said, I've gone back and watched the stuff, but I wanted to hear that from somebody like you who's on a podcast with them. What is it for like newer fans? Because that's the thing that's so cool about getting to do a show like this is, like I mentioned, Ricky Morton is a past guest of this show as well. So is his son, Kerry Morton, who just came through with his partners with the Southern Six. Like, it's cool to be able to connect the dots of so many different times of not only pro wrestling, but for us, we also cover combat sports as well. And you talk about Magnum's credentials as a wrestler as well, which I would imagine would not only endear him, to fans, but, knowing about your father, Verne, and his background with wrestling and stuff like that. Talk to me a little bit about the AWA, my man. Like, what is it that you feel like made the AWA the powerhouse that it was for so long?
Well, because it was a great place to work. Verne let his talent off the whole month of May and the first 2 weeks of June every year. The talent worked about 225 to 250 days out of the year. We're like Magnum TA, he worked 365 days and wrestled sometimes twice on Saturday and twice on Sunday. Verne wasn't that kind of a promoter. He wanted the talent to make good money, which they did. He was considered the best payoff promoter in professional wrestling. And he was very fair with it. And what he paid out every time. The main event got more than, the underneath card, but the guys made a great living there. And and Verne was big on family time, and he gave them time to spend with their family. It got to a point where it grew so big, our territory ran from Winnipeg to St. Louis all the way to the West Coast. They talk about New York. Well, they had New York and Pennsylvania and Washington and Connecticut, some of the bigger, larger cities, but we covered the biggest territory. And it was phenomenal. And the talent, he only ran with maybe 16 to 20 guys. And they all, everybody worked hard. He ran with 4 to 6 matches on per card. So all these sellouts, we were doing pretty well and doing very well.
Well, and not to mention, man, that's not only the one mark, not only being how big AWA is, but I mean, for anybody that does their research, I mean, Verne cultivated so many of the top stars that you could ever really mention in wrestling. When you talk about a Ric Flair, a Sergeant Slaughter, the Iron Sheik, Ken Patera, all these people that come through there and that he's helped train and all those things too, along with you guys having that successful promotion and things of that nature. For you, what do you think it was about the way that your dad was able to train people that made them be so successful? Because I said, I mean, you could literally go down a laundry list.
Well, he trained 144 professional wrestlers, and out of that, maybe 6 didn't make it to the main event level. And Blackjack Mulligan, Blackjack Lanza, Lars Ole, Gene Anderson, the list goes on and on of people that he trained. And it was a very tough camp. It was 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. I trained let's see, 1972, the Olympics. Ken Patera, Verne was sponsoring him. And then when he came out of the Olympics, he was going to turn pro. So myself, and then I played football with Jim Brunzell at Minnesota. I said, Jim, he was playing semi-pro football. Why don't you give wrestling a crack? He said, well, I'm a good athlete. And I said, yeah, you're a good athlete. You got it. You're a state high jump champion. You played football. You can adapt to it. And the Iron Sheik, who he sponsored, he didn't sponsor him, but one of the men from the Olympic team recommended that Khosrow wanted to wrestle professionally. So he came in, Ken Patera, myself, Brunzell, Ric Flair played football with us. He wanted to wrestle. He came in with us. And Bob Bruggers, who played football, he was recommended by Wahoo McDaniels. Bob was a little older. He was about 32. So it was a little harder on him. And unfortunately, he got in a plane accident and never really had the opportunity to just get into where he was going to get in that main event level and never quite made it. But it was, you were trained properly. A lot of the people out there today, I've got guys who are wannabes that think they can train professional wrestlers. But we did 6 hours a day, 6 days a week we got Sunday off. And in an old barn with one light over the ring, no windows, no doors. We were on the second floor. And we started, when the Olympics were over, we started in September, end of September, and we ran to March 1st. And in Minnesota, you get those 10, 15, 20 below days, and we'd be in the camp. No windows, no doors. And the first hour, we had to build up and do 1,000 free squats nonstop. And that took about 35 minutes to make. And then the rest of the 25 minutes was more calisthenics outside the ring, then into the ring, a few more calisthenics. And then we would learn to hit the ropes. And that would tear the skin from underneath your arm all the way down to your side. And that lasts for about 6 weeks. Then your body would hard up. And then we'd do bumps, learning how to protect ourselves and getting body slammed or a hip toss or a Beal throw, and how to take control of the match and not let your opponent control your body. If they can control your body, that's when you're going to get hurt. And we do about 1,000 bumps a day. And it was your body was just, those first 6 weeks were horrendous. And as we progressed, then we ended up the last hour we did sprints. He had a place, we had it was about a half a mile down. You'd run 10 yards, walk 10 yards, run 10 yards. Then when we got back to the barn, we went across the street where you went some more land. It was down in the riverbanks of the Minnesota River. We ran up and down those banks. And we'd come in at dark, and we'd see poor Flair and Patera. They'd come in about 15, 20 minutes after us, dragging their asses. But when we left there, Verne said to us, there isn't anywhere you guys can go or will go, that you don't have to be afraid of anyone. We had a whole hour of submission wrestling with him and Billy Robinson, you know, and they'd show you about 3 or 4 holds. Then you get down on the mat with them, and then they'd put their arm out. You say, hey, the arm is there. And then, you know, by the time you think what to do it, they would reverse it and stick your foot right up your butt. But we learned how to handle ourselves. And we were very respected when we went to other areas. Coming out of that camp, they sent us, we went up to Georgia. They were going to build a match with Brunzell and myself against Cowboy Bob Orton and Dick Slater. They were the champions. And walked into the locker room, and Brute Bernard was sitting there with his manager. And we went over and I sat down next to him and introduced myself. And he looked at me and he said, your dad is I won't say the words here, a CS. And I said, well, I'm sure he thinks the same thing about you. And he looked at me, you know, and he was a tough guy. And him and his manager got up and walked into another locker room. So Jim and I just followed him over there and sat back down to him and said, hey, you got a problem with us? With me or both of us? No, I don't have any problem with you. Shook our hands, and that was it. But then we went down that night in Columbus, Georgia, and we wrestled with Rip Hawk and Dr. Jerry Graham. And they were both at the end of their career. And nobody knew us. We didn't think in Atlanta. And we went in that Columbus arena and we tore that place apart. People were standing. We wrestled about 20 some minutes with them. And we came in, the promoter down there was all mad. He said, how are my people going to follow that? That's their problem. And the booker then didn't like it. So he booked us every night in a match with Bob Backlund and Jerry Briscoe in a clean match for 2 weeks. So we left, went back home. We said, we're missing Denver and St. Louis and Chicago and all the major cities where we'll make a lot more money than we are down here wrestling Backlund and Jerry Briscoe. That isn't why they brought us down here. But, you know, that's one of the bookers and some of the guys that just didn't. So doing a little better than them, I guess.
Well, with that said, I mean, so I've seen some of your stuff with Brunzell and things like that. Did you enjoy your time more with Brunzell or as a single, or do you have like a favorite time in your career, whether that was AAW or why am I saying AAW? I meant to say AWA.
I didn't get to AAW.
Yeah, I meant to say AWA if I could spit it out.
Yeah, that's all right.
Was AWA your favorite time in your career? Or did you have more fun as a single, or?
Yeah, no, we were really and I don't want to sound like we're bragging, but we were an exceptional team. And we know that because of our competition, and they would, you know, say that. It wasn't coming from us. As a single, I loved that too. I mean, after Jim, I had partners, but it didn't click like we did. You know, we grew up played football in Minnesota together. We were good friends, and going through the camp together, we just had that chemistry. You know, we could kind of tell where we were going with the match. Didn't have to think a whole lot when we had control of it. And just to get thrown in with another partner and get that kind of thinking the same way and moving the same way, it didn't work as well. And wrestling as a single, I love that too. I had some great matches with Ray Stevens and Nick Bockwinkel, Pat Patterson, Jerry Blackwell. I'll tell you a funny story. Remember Jerry Blackwell? Mm-hmm. 450 pounds. Son of a
big
gun.
ass dude.
He can move like a cat. We're wrestling in Rockford, Illinois, and it's summertime. It's 95 degrees, and we're in a high school gym with all those fluorescent lights, the old basketball lights on. Mm-hmm. And it is hot as hell, and the humidity is way up. And I'm in the locker room, and I said, I got that big Blackwell tonight. I said, I'll be back here in about 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to blow him up. He won't be able to move. That son of a gun had me in the ring for 45 minutes. And all he did was lay that weight on me. I thought I was going to die. So, of course, everybody was giving me the
15 minutes
crap when I came back in. Well, what happened out there? But he was excellent in the ring for a big guy. He could move. His timing was phenomenal, and he knew how to take control. And once he got control, boy, it was hard to get away from him.
Well, we talked a little bit about Verne and the way that he trained people, and with having that wrestling background and stuff like that, it leads me to ask, like I said, our show also covers combat sports and things like that. Have you ever gotten into MMA or anything like that, with you having the background you do with wrestling or anything?
No, I never did. Our sport was, different than MMA. I think I had probably enough knowledge on the submission holds, and I had good balance in that, but I don't know if make that transition that well. I didn't have that strong of an amateur background, but what we worked with Verne, we had to learn that. But I don't know, to go in with the guy. I don't know. I don't have any idea. I know I have to defend myself. I know that, and I know submission holds and all that, but. So a little different style.
Just wondered what you thought, because like I said, I know the wrestling base that Verne had, and it's dope to see in 2024, at least in my opinion, to see how much you've seen the crossover from MMA to wrestling with guys like Brock Lesnar. Yeah. You've seen multiple guys come and go, Ronda Rousey with what she just did and all that stuff as well. So I always have enjoyed some of the crossover and how some of that stuff will help with training. Speaking of which, shout out to our other sponsors, Mitten Muay Thai. As you can see here in this video, they were getting at it at the last event, Mitten Muay Thai 3, May 3rd, going down. Get you some tickets at the Imperial Palace. Make sure you get down there. As you can see, somebody might be slipping. But with that being said, man, hey, man, you're not lying. We were just talking about this. I just put out a clip. If you guys are new here, make sure you follow us at KO3C Pod. We were talking about how they want to institute Muay Thai, which is all your kicks, knees, elbows, all that stuff. You can't wrestle, but they want to do it with 4-ounce gloves, which, man, that just makes for an action-packed fight.
Action-packed, and I would imagine a lot of knockouts.
Hey, man, that's what people like to see, from the pro wrestling side of things. What they say about a good car crash every once in a while. I feel like May 3rd, we might see more than a few of those come here in Clinton Township, Michigan. Shout out to our guy, Phil, who was on the show with us as well. But speaking of AWA and the people that were trained up out of there, another person that's on the Remco line, if I'm not mistaken, is Sergeant Slaughter, man.
He's coming up. Yep, he's on the Remco line. Sergeant Slaughter was trained by Verne. Mm-hmm. He went through with Chris Taylor and Buddy Rose. He also trained. going back, Larry Henning and his son Kurt.
Larry the Axe.
And Kurt was trained by Verne. And there was a lot of guys that came in that Shawn Michaels, Marty Jannetty. They had been trained. Shawn was trained a lot better than Marty was, but they learned in the AWA because of the talent we had there, and and the style that Verne wanted. But they were quite a pair in their early years.
Definitely enjoyed watching the Rockers, man. I just watched the A&E documentary on Sergeant Slaughter and his run from not just the AWA, but then when he went up to WWF and all that stuff. Uh-huh. What do you think it was about that character that really took it off? Do you think a lot of it was just because of the time that he was doing the whole G.I. Joe thing, or was it more, Sarge was just the right person for that character, man? Because, still, he's going to be here next week, the week after we get back from WrestleMania for Astronomicon, and for that to still be as big as it is now, with that being as big that long ago.
Well, he came along at the right time, and he had the look. He believed he was that person, and that's the biggest thing. You can't be somebody you're not. And he really always wanted to be that. And finally, to be a good professional wrestler, Verne always told us, you have to let your inner self come out. You can't tie that. There's somebody in there that you really want to be. That's who you really are. And a lot of people, you just can't let that come out. I know when I trained guys and I would tell them that, they would look at me like they didn't know what was going on. So I'd take them out that night, get them drunk, and then the real them came out. And I said, now that's the real you. Not present yourself that way. And Sergeant Slaughter came along with that time. He was struggling a little bit as a masked man. He wasn't, it wasn't good for him, but Lord Alfred Hayes thought he could take him and make him another like Super Destroyer tag team partner.
Okay.
But that wasn't his persona. And when he got away from that, and of course, then the thing with Iraq and everything hit about the same time, it just fit in. And the ideal foe for him was the Iron Sheik. And it hit. He just grabbed onto it and became a superstar. And that's really his image. When you really come down and sit down with him, he's pretty quiet, calm, kind of boring. But that's not who he really is. He's really Sergeant Slaughter. That's the real him. And that's what individuals, Verne would get that out of him quicker than anybody. I mean, most of the time to make main event, you have to wrestle 5 to 10 years. Our talent was about 3 years after being trained by Verne. And we were hitting that mark. So
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you speak about guys like that, like a Sergeant Slaughter who, Verne trained that were able to, completely grasp a character and completely do that. I mean, another guy that jumps off the page right off the rip is somebody who you said you came up with as well. Talk to me about Ric Flair. Did you guys know when you were coming up like that? Did you know like that he'd blow up like he did?
Rick was Rick, and always Rick the way you see him. I'll tell you a college story about him. So a couple of them. We went there, played college football together. And Rick was called a non-predictor. He didn't have the grades, but he was also predicted an All-American as a guard. And Rick was about 280 at that time, 270. But Rick was a party guy. So we get to Minnesota, the football team, we come in early. And of course, Rick can't practice with the team, but he got into a fraternity. So the first week when school starts, they have these fraternities and sororities have these big rushes, and then they have a little party. So he got into this one where there was a couple of different ones that had the athletes in it. He was in one, and we were in another one just for a short time. And the sorority that was affiliated to this fraternity, they were bringing the freshman girls over and having a little party and meeting everybody. So as they come over, they come walking down the sidewalk, and all of a sudden they hear a woo, and they look up, and in the window in the top of the dorm is open. There's one light bulb above it that's on, and there's Rick standing there naked. Come on, ladies, woo! Well, so, take a ride on Space Mountain. Well, I think some of most of the freshmen, they went running back, but those veterans, they came in, and I'm sure a couple of them took a little ride on Space Mountain that night.
That's not too surprising that Nate was Nate, and even back in the college days.
So he never played a down of football. He never dressed for a game. And then one day, Minnesota was playing Michigan. And,
go figure. Go blue.
With the following Monday, Murray Warmath was our head coach. He calls me up, Gagne. I said, yes, coach. He said, where's Flair? I said, I don't know. Well, you're supposed to be keeping an eye out. I said, I am not being for him. I said, what's wrong? You got to find him for me. He needs to come up to the office right away. So I finally tracked him down and said, Murray wants to see you. Oh, God. I said, what's wrong? I don't know. What he had done, he met a girl in Michigan, and he was calling her from Minnesota to Michigan. He had run up a $1,700 phone bill.
Oh, boy.
So he didn't last too long. But no, Rick was always Rick, and he'll never change.
Hey, man, it's gotten him where he is today, man. I mean, the guy's just as big now with all the stuff he's got going in all the different avenues as he ever was before. So, I mean, at a certain point, it's gotten him to where he's at.
Well, see, I mean, there's an example right there. What you saw is what you got. That was the real Ric Flair. That's who he really was. He was a party guy all the time. I mean, he was a good athlete too, a very good wrestler. Turned out to
Can't argue that.
Yeah.
Can't argue that at all, man. I would say most people would have him somewhere in their top 5 somewhere.
Yeah. He was amazing. You know, TA told me, I think they wrestled 19 draws in a month.
And those are hour-long draws, too.
Well, a couple of them were 90-minute ones, too.
Good Lord.
And that's and that pace that they set that's a pretty stiff pace to keep that going that long. You got to really be in shape.
Always had all the respect in the world for that. Like I said, with us coming from the combat sports end of things, but you know, you talk about having to train and get into shape and all those things. I've also done my research. I've seen that you've still had your hands out here with a few of the big names that we're now seeing in WWE, like Tiffany Stratton. So talk to me about that. What made her somebody that you'd want to train? Because I checked out your interview with our guys over at State of Pro Wrestling. I know you weren't, training people regularly like that, but talk to me about training Tiffany Stratton and what did you see in her?
Well, a friend of mine was friends with her parents, and he called me up one day and he said, "Greg, you got to do me a favor. This girl wants to be a professional wrestler." And I said, "Oh man." John was his name. And I said, "I really don't want to, get in the ring with a gal and trainer." He said, "Well, she was a gymnastics champion. She was a weightlifting champion. She was a bodybuilding champion. And she really wants to do this. And it'd be great for me if you would do it for him." So there was a couple other guys at the same time that wanted to be trained. Tyler Rampage, he should be coming along here soon. He had to try out with the WWE, but him and this JDX that I trained, they're down there when COVID hit. So only had 2 days of training and they haven't been called back yet, but they're great. They're going to be really good pieces of talent. But anyhow, she was a pain, she was so full of herself. And she'd come to, I threw her out twice. I said, "Get out of here. I'm done with you." She has that attitude, When she came in and the guys are working hard and we're going through, and I said, "Hey, you're late." And she said, "Well, I'm tired." And she laid on the mat and I said, "If you're that tired, get your ass out of here. Go home. I'm done. I'm doing this for nothing. I don't need to have this kind of headache. These guys are working hard. And this is part of wrestling. If you can't do it, get out." So she went home and then she came back and apologized. And then it was Ken Anderson, his gym that we were working in. And Ken was there one night and she started again. And so, "I've had it. Done. Out. Go. I'm done with you. Stay out of but." I said, "Don't butts and don't be talking back to me. I'm done with you." So Ken said, "I can't believe the attitude on that woman." I said, "She'll be back in 10 minutes. She came back in about 10 minutes. And then Ken took her to a side. He said, "Can I talk to her?" I said, "Yeah, go ahead." So he took her to the side and laid down what was what, which I had done a couple times already. And then she really caught on and she was phenomenal. I guarantee you next year she could be a world champion there for him.
Wouldn't doubt it.
She's got all the credentials. I mean, she's a hard worker. She's got her gymnastics background. She won the gymnastics state champion. And like I say, then she went, and from there, she won that. She went into weightlifting. And in a year, she set a record for her weight class in a press over her head. And then she got bored with that. And then she took up bodybuilding. In less than a year, she went in and she won that. So she's got the ability. She's got the athletic ability. I think she's got the mindset now. She knows what she has to do. And somebody said to me the other day, I did a podcast, they said, well, her attitude, she kind of puts that on. I said, "No, she's not putting that on. That's the real her." And I said, "That's why she'll be successful. She's just got that That's her attitude. And the people are cheering her and they think she's putting it on, and she's not putting it on. That's her. But great athlete. She's going to do phenomenal work with the WWE.
I was going to ask, man, I mean, dude, she's already killed it. I mean, what she was doing in NXT, they moved her up now over to SmackDown, and I'm really excited to see the matchup she can have there. I mean, what are your thoughts on what we've seen so far in WWE? Are you still keeping up with what she's done so far, or is it one of those things you just kind of knew what it was and you're kind of doing your own thing?
No, I watch it, when I can. I watch it a lot. I tape it and try to get back and watch what I want to watch. And they got that girl Cargill coming in there.
Dude, she's a beast.
Oh my God. I can't wait to see those two tangle. They both have that same kind of attitude, and it should be fun to watch in the ring.
And they're both great athletes, like you said.
Are.
That's the thing.
And they both have that attitude. So when they go face to face, it should be something else. But they have
a matchup made.
They have a lot of great girls in there. The WWE does. They have great talent, top to bottom. They've got the best. I don't want to diminish AEW. They have some great talent over there too. But to me, that's a different style, much different style and presentation than what the WWE has.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, it's noticeable if you're watching it from a fan's point of view too. I mean, AEW definitely has a lot of dope in-ring matches and stuff like that. Like, I mean, from bringing guys like Will Ospreay and stuff like that over there. As far as in-ring, he's one of my favorite ones to watch as far as the in-ring. But to your point, when you talk about like WWE, look at what we're getting as we're about to go into WrestleMania this week. I mean, you're not seeing stories that are lasting as long as what you're seeing over there in WWE, and the way, like you said, that people are going to be built up. I mean, I think a match with her and Jade would be dope. A match with her and Bianca would be sweet. Mm-hmm. I mean, eventually, her and Charlotte will lock up at some point too. Like, she's got, I mean, and the way the crowd is already taken to her on the main roster. Yeah. I mean, that tells you something in and of itself. Because, I mean, I think I saw a stat the other day that for like the total time that she was in NXT, it was like almost a year, almost to the day, and then she was on the main roster. So it's not even like she had this long drawn out run in NXT before she goes to SmackDown. And like I said, the way the crowd picked her up, man, I feel like it's only on and up for her.
Well, it goes back to training. Remember, I told you back in our day, it usually took 5 to 10 years to get in the main event. People Verne trained about 3 years. Tiffany, she went through the same training regime that Verne did. That's what I did with all of them. I cut it down a little bit. We didn't do 6 hours, but we get to go to 2, 3, sometimes 4. But they did everything that we did in our camp, and it was a formula that worked. And it's amazing, but it's not. Because I was around it so much. I saw my dad train these guys. I watched these guys develop. I watched how quick we developed in the ring, compared to other people that have been wrestling maybe 5 or 6 years, and they're still not in the main event. And we're at 3 years and we're wrestling main events and selling out buildings around the country. That was unheard of. And she's got that ability, without a doubt. And so do these other kids I have, and I wish I could get them a break here somewhere.
Hey, man, if they're ever looking for more exposure, man, we'd be happy to bring them through the show. We'll be, as we record this tonight, we'll be live tonight with Lindsay Snow, who's competing in Josh Barnett's Bloodsport next weekend for, WrestleMania week and all that stuff. So definitely have to make that happen. Another guy I wanted to ask you about while I had you on here was with WrestleMania coming up, and you got the Hall of Fame and all those things. I wanted to get your thoughts on Paul Heyman, man. Paul Heyman had his time in AWA as a manager with the big-ass phone and cracking people over the head with the phone and all that stuff. But the way that guy has evolved over the years and things like that to get to what we're seeing now, what are your thoughts on a guy like Paul Heyman, and what do you think about him going to the Hall of Fame?
I think it's excellent. I mean, he has a tremendous mind for professional wrestling. And, even though he couldn't get in the ring and wrestle, he knew how to talk. He knew how to get his talent established and get them over with the public, either hating them, mostly hating them, and liking them. And he had that. He wasn't the Bobby Heenan type, but he still irritated people. with the way he talked and how braggadocious he is, but he's excellent. He deserves to be put in the Hall of Fame. He's just, he's a talented, very knowledgeable, a great mind for the sport, great mind for the business, and he's done an excellent job.
I couldn't agree more. As far as managers, man, if anybody's a manager, man, I mean, Paul Heyman's got to be one of the first names off your lips. You talk about guys like Bobby Heenan, you see so much of him in a guy like Paul Heyman, like you said, just to be able to run his mouth and piss people off. Obviously, I know Bobby got in the ring and, wrestled a little bit, but like you said, that same style as a manager. Yep. And the way that he's been able to evolve over the years, from like how he was with Brock Lesnar versus what we see with Roman Reigns now, where it's just like, I'm just the advocate for the tribal chief, versus when it was Brock Lesnar, you knew he was, bringing up like that diamond in the rough kind of thing. So that's one thing that's always been entertaining to me, is the way that all the different incarnations you see of Paul, from like ECW and all those things, they're all totally different.
They're all different, but that's why I say he's got a good, good foundation for the all-around concept of professional wrestling, I guess the way to put it. But no, I mean, to me, the best of all time, and I think that'll go down in history with anybody, is Bobby Heenan, because he can not only do it outside the ring and talking for the guys, but he did it inside the ring too. The people got what they wanted when he got in the ring. He was phenomenal talent. And
it was so entertaining.
Oh, was he ever quick-witted? I mean, my God, he'd stop you. He'd stop. I'd seen with some of those announcers, they go to ask him some boom, bing. He would throw them all off. No, he had a great mind, and Heyman has a different style, but he's still got that thing that the people don't like. They hate. They want to get out their hands on him, and that's what Bobby brought to the table. Paul can't get in the ring and do what he did, but he can get him worked up.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing you see him do everywhere. So was Bobby, man. Like, seeing the stuff with him in the weasel suit and all the stuff he did over the years, man. Like, that guy, even, I mean, and you talk about some of the other names like Kurt Hennig and all them guys too, man. I mean, even like him and Hennig together and all that stuff.
Yeah. Kurt really didn't need him for a manager though, because Kurt could talk and he could go in the ring. But putting them together, if they're going to put a title on him, it even brought more heat to it. And that's the only way you do it. You don't want to take away from him. It was like him and Nick Bockwinkel. Bockwinkel was phenomenal in the ring. He was a great talker, but Bobby added that extra little heat to it. So
he was one of the best AWA champs of all time. Plus, I mean, you've heard Jericho and other guys talk about how they credit Nick Bockwinkel with wearing the suits and stuff like that, kind of helped with some of the stuff he's had go down. Well, the last couple questions I got for you before I let you get out of here, we did talk about, like I said, this will be airing during WrestleMania week. You got to tell me, you have any thoughts on the big story we've got here with the return of The Rock and the bloodline and all that stuff as we head into WrestleMania?
Okay. What's going to happen on night one?
That's the tag match. That's the tag match with Seth and
right.
Yeah. Seth and Cody versus Rock and Roman.
Okay, who's going to win that one? What's your prediction?
I mean, I think since they're talking the bloodline rules thing, I almost feel like Seth and Cody got to lose somehow in order for the bloodline rules thing to mean anything.
Okay, if that happens, here's my thought. If that happened and Cody gets reigns, what if The Rock did something to cause Reigns to lose the match?
I think that could definitely happen, because you've seen all the side eye between them, and we just talked about Heyman. Like, Heyman's kind of already been playing off like he can see the dissension between the two, and I can totally see something like that happening.
Well, The Rock acknowledged Reigns as the tribal chief, but
He did, but if you notice, there's all the little things, and that's what makes The Rock so good when you look at it. Like, he's not really holding up the figure.
He's the chief.
Right. The final boss, as he's called.
And I thought, well, if something happened in that match and he caused Reigns to lose the match to Cody. That switches him right back over to the other side. And I don't know. That's just it's just a thought.
I think that's something that we talked about on the show going forward. Another thing that's interesting to me too is, I mean, even though he's got the World Heavyweight Championship on him, like this whole situation with Cody and Roman and all that stuff is really kind of put Seth on the back burner in a lot of ways. And even though he's still in that match night 1 and he's going to have his match night 2 against Drew, I mean, even if they, like I said, I feel like you're going to have some kind of the thing with the bloodline rules. And I could see Seth getting jealous. Like, maybe they lose and Seth has something to do with it. And it just kind of sticks in his craw. And I could see Seth kind of doing something with Cody too. But
that's a thought.
It would be interesting.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Yeah, if Cody caused Seth to get beat in the tag match, that's another good thought. A lot of different ways this thing twists and turns to it.
And it makes it so good. I mean, it's been so long, so many years you could go and be like, oh, I feel like who's going to win. It's just nice to be in a spot where you're genuinely excited to see what's going to happen with it, man. I hope if we do get to the bloodline rules thing, the one thing that we've talked about on the show consistently that I think would be cool, if you're going to go the bloodline rules match, especially with you having the 2 Usos facing each other in the same show, I want to see Jimmy out there. I want to see Jay out there. I want to see Rikishi out there. As many of them that you can out of that bloodline family, if we're going to use the whole bloodline rules thing, at least what's doable. I feel like that for that to make sense, I feel like that would be a cool touch.
It'll be interesting. They've done a great promotion on this thing. This will be the biggest one they've ever had. And if it isn't, I'll be really surprised. But they've got a good, from top to bottom, the card is stacked.
Couldn't argue that at all.
Another one,
the 2-day format,
is Randy Orton. I love. I worked with his dad. I mean, phenomenal timing, great in the ring, and Randy was just a stud. So
that guy's so smooth.
Oh, they're so, a lot of old school in him.
And he seems like now, like, he's another guy like we talked about earlier with guys who, kind of were getting in earlier. He got in when he got into wrestling, he self-admittedly said that he had never really planned on getting into wrestling, but because of having that second, having the family background in wrestling, how he was able to take to it. But you can he's a guy to me. I've been a big fan of Randy for years, but I think the coolest thing to watch with him now is I feel like if you've watched him from the beginning where you see the Randy with the blue and yellow generic shorts when he fought Holly and all that in the beginning to where he's at now, just the maturation of it. And you can see how he can switch at any drop of a dime, whether that's the heel Randy Orton to babyface Randy Orton, and how he can it doesn't matter who he's in the ring with. Even a guy like Logan Paul, who I've gotten to be there for a few of those matches on the big shows. Like a guy like him can even make Logan Paul and everybody else look like $1 million. So I'm 100% with that. I hope we see another world title reign in the future of the Viper.
I do too. In Logan Paul, I want to give that kid credit, a lot of credit. I mean, to come in and done what he's done in that short of time.
Yes.
Phenomenal athlete. Phenomenal.
And, dude, the business sense. Again, people can hate on the Pauls all you want. They're going to have Prime as the first on-mat sponsor that WWE's ever had after WrestleMania. Like, dude, that's a huge deal. And then the one that got me, I was at WrestleMania last year, and when he jumps off the top rope and my man is holding the camera out here so that he can videotape the whole thing and still lands a perfect elbow drop on the table, even if he landed on his own guy, that shit took a lot of precision to do for a guy who hasn't been wrestling that long.
It was phenomenal. I give him credit, and he's a marketer. He knows how to market himself, and then he gets, he can back up the talk.
Hell yeah!
And that was amazing to me, the stuff he did in the ring in that short of time.
Can't argue it, man. And I mean, I feel like I've said it for a while, man. Whenever Jake Paul gets away from, doing the boxing stuff, whenever that ends up being, because it can't go on forever. But I tell you, if him and Logan Paul don't have a tag match at some point, I feel like that's going to be like the biggest missed opportunity on WWE's part, because when they brought him down at Saudi, I'm like, yo, if this guy doesn't go over to the WWE, I don't know what the fuck they're doing. I'm just saying, they both can talk a blue streak of shit, and Jake Paul and Logan Paul them both. It's like the classic heel baby face thing. People either love them or they hate them. And me coming from the fight world too, I'm not the biggest fan of all the matchups that they have, but the one thing that I can't deny is the fact that, like you said, they were able to build themselves up from nothing. The fact that people are paying to see these fights, whether he gets his ass kicked or he doesn't. And lastly, even on Jake's side of things, you know, we just talked about what Logan's doing with the on-mat sponsorship thing. On the fight side of things, Jake is managing a lot of the top fighters like Amanda Serrano and things like that. And we've had multiple fighters come on here and talk about the way that Jake is handling things with their career as well too. So, I mean, one of the few guys, while I think a lot of it is smoke and mirrors, I think at the same time, I feel like a lot of the things that he's tried to fight for, as far as like the pay things and things of that nature, man, I feel like all in all, like the Paul brothers, hate the Paul brothers, they brought a lot of light back onto the sport of boxing that I think was gone for a while.
They are very good entrepreneurs, and they have a great business sense, and they know what clicks and what doesn't, and how to get it clicked. No, they're excellent, and you know, top to bottom, this is, I think, one of the best WrestleManias that they've ever booked.
Dude, the tag team title match is going to be awesome too.
They've had some great stuff over the years, but boy, this one is, you know, you got the girls feud going, you got everything going in this one, and it'll be very interesting. That's for sure. I guess.
So what's the WrestleMania plan for you?
And you know, it's one you don't want to miss.
Damn right. Where are you watching it at? What's the WrestleMania plan for you?
You know, I don't know. I usually don't buy it.
Shit, Peacock, you don't have to now.
No, is it going live on Peacock?
Yeah, they're all on Peacock now. You don't got to buy them now. If you got Peacock, you're straight.
Really?
Yes.
I did not even know that. Well, I'll have to figure out how to get on Peacock. You know, at my age and all this new stuff. It's tough for me to go from channel to channel.
Hey man, technology in general will do that to you.
What are you doing wrong? I said, I don't know. The arrow's up here, and where do I go from here? And try to talk through it. So, anyhow,
hell yeah, man.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a good time. Well, the last one I got for you, dude, we have a segment that we call Locker Room Etiquette, and it's not what you'd think. I'm not trying to poke and pick and prod and find out who didn't like who or any of this kind of shit. What we do
if you did, I'd tell you.
Hell yeah. Well, that's why we got to have a part 2 to this interview. But with that said, what we do with Locker Room Etiquette, it's like things that you would give advice to people, number one, or things that are like pet peeves of yours in the locker room. Now, we've had everybody from Josh Briggs, who you see on NXT, telling us, bring your own squirt bottle, bring your own wrist tape. We've had wash your balls, wash your gear, keep your baby mama out the locker room. Silas Young telling us to make sure that you never get too big-headed. Ninja Mac from GCW telling us to always never be too big-headed to not train and stay in the ring and those things. If you had anything that annoys you in a locker room, what would it be? And if you had a piece of advice that you would give to any new guy or girl that's coming into the business, what would it be?
A new one coming in, just keep your mouth shut and listen and watch. Watch every single match. That's what we were always told to do. Go out and watch every single match and ask questions when they come back in. But more important is to listen. Ask questions and listen. Don't talk back and don't think you know it all, because you can work 20 years in that business and still not know it all.
I feel like that's applicable for life, man.
It is. And that's what my dad used to tell us. It's no different than life. And, you know, when you're coming up, just listen, respect the people that are in it, and ask them questions. And, you know, when you did that, those talented people would always help you. And we were surrounded by, you know, some of the greats. I mean, Ray the Crippler Stevens, phenomenal timing, when to do something, when not to do it. Nick Bockwinkel, he was more consistent and pretty methodical. But everybody had a different style. Jerry Blackwell, a little different style, but yet the timing and when he did stuff and when he didn't, and how he did it. And, you don't have to do 100 things in the ring. The things that you do need to mean something. And if you do them at the right time, you don't have to do a whole lot. And that's hard for the young people to understand until they watch everything. And if you used to, sit back there with some of the young people and watch it on a screen in the back, or some arenas didn't have it. We had to go out and kind of watch through the curtains, and then they would ask questions. And that's what we learned. And we listened to those veterans. So, I mean, that isn't a one word, what to do. But that's what I tell all my young guys when I train them.
It's good advice though, man. Like I said, that applies to life. I mean, that's something that I've heard around the fight world for years too. I mean, you can always learn from whether that's watching, listening, and pro wrestling's no different. I mean, like you said, learning the timing and knowing when to do something versus just going out there and doing moves. I mean, that's, I think, like you said, I think that's the thing that you see as like that step up when you see people go from, okay, he's a good worker, she's a good worker, she's a good wrestler, to, okay, this person's a main eventer, because they know when to do stuff, when to turn people up, when to bring them down.
It's not how much you do in the ring, it's when you do it and how you do it. And that's the hardest thing for young people, because they just want to boom, 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 boom. And they see all this flipping and flopping and flipping and flopping, and that can be entertaining. But does it establish you as a top contender?
Totally makes sense.
Yeah, but it doesn't. So, I mean, that would be my advice to any young person coming into the sport.
Hell yeah, man. Another good one added to the locker room etiquette list by another one of the legends, Greg Gagne. Well, dude, before we get out of here, let everybody know where they can find Remco Toys. Let everybody know where they can find the podcast with you and Magnum TA. And like I said, we'll definitely have to do a part 2 to this. If Magnum ever wants to come through and talk about it, you guys
he'd love to.
Welcome.
He'll love to.
Man, be more than happy to have him.
We'll come on together. You can have him alone, and then we'll come on as a tag team.
I'm with it, bro. And hopefully by then, like I said, J-Bone will be back with us and Corey will be back with us, so we can have the full show with us. Like I said, I would be more than happy to do a round 2.
Well, for your Remco, the action figures right now, the Rock and Roll Express, the Missing Link, Bobo Brazil, Hacksaw Duggan, Tito Santana, and a whole lot more, you can go to powertownwrestling.com. And the pre-sales end April 8th. So don't miss it. And they're going like crazy. And for the Ultra line, we got a new one coming out. And starting in May, we'll have something new every month. So keep watching Powertown. And if you want to get the Ultras that are left with Lou Thez, Verne Gagne, King Kong Brody, Stan Hansen, Kerry Von Erich, or Magnum TA, you go to the wrestlingcollection.com. And there's a few left. But you better get them now. They're going quick.
Selling like hotcakes. Make sure you get you some. Shout out to our sponsors, Potter's Tree Service. Shout out to Mitten Muay Thai. Make sure you guys are in the building May 3rd. Get you a ticket. Like you heard the man say himself, it looks like somebody's getting knocked out on May 3rd. Get you a ticket at them links. And if you're watching this, by the time you see it, the links for the Remco stuff will be in the description as well. Until next time, and in the in-between time, we appreciate y'all.